The Crethaxian warships moved through space like living shadows, their hulls pulsing with bioluminescent veins that glowed a sickly green. They had crushed 47 star systems in just 18 months. Every species that stood against them fell within hours. Their weapons adapted to every defense. Their shields learned from every attack, and their hunger for conquest seemed endless. The Galactic Council watched in horror as another civilization broadcast its final distress signal. The Yularan people had lasted 3 hours. Their planetary shields, considered the finest in the galaxy, had simply been absorbed by the Crethaxian biomechanical technology. Now their world burned, and the Dominion fleet moved on to its next target. In the council chambers orbiting the neutral world of Axis Prime, representatives from 200 species gathered in emergency session. Fear hung in the air like smoke. Every defensive strategy had failed. Every weapon proved useless. The Crethaxians didn't just defeat their enemies, they learned from them, adapted to them, and became stronger with each victory. They will reach human space within 2 months, announced Council Speaker Vexthar, her translator rendering her clicking mandibles into flat, emotionless words. The Dominion has sent them the standard ultimatum: surrender or face annihilation. The assembled representatives turned their attention to the human delegation. Humanity was young by galactic standards, barely 300 years since their first faster-than-light flight. They controlled 15 star systems, most of them small colonies scattered around their homeworld Earth. They were unremarkable in nearly every way. Ambassador Chen stood slowly. She was an older woman with gray hair pulled back severely from her weathered face. "What do you recommend, Council Speaker?" Vexthar's antennae drooped. "Surrender. Every species that has resisted has been exterminated. Those who submitted immediately were enslaved but alive. It is not ideal, but it is survival." "How many species have fought back?" Ambassador Chen asked. 31. "And how many won?" The chamber fell silent. The answer was obvious. None. Not a single species had managed even a tactical victory against the Dominion. Their adaptive technology was simply too advanced, too perfect. Ambassador Chen nodded slowly. "Thank you for your counsel, Council Speaker. Humanity will consider its options carefully." She left the chamber with her small delegation trailing behind her. The other species watched them go, many feeling pity for the humans. In 2 months, humanity would likely cease to exist as a free people. 3 days later, the Galactic Council's long-range sensors detected something unexpected. A human warship had launched from Earth's orbital yards and was accelerating toward the Xerion system, where the Crethaxian Dominion fleet was gathering for its assault on human territory. Just one ship. The vessel's profile appeared on monitoring stations across Allied space. It was called the Defiant, and by galactic standards it was pathetically outdated. A Striker-class heavy cruiser, barely 400 meters long with conventional fusion drives and projectile-based weapons. The kind of ship that hadn't been considered cutting-edge in 2 centuries. "They're insane," muttered a Valorian military attaché as he studied the data. "That ship will last 30 seconds against a Dominion destroyer, let alone their entire fleet." But the Defiant continued on its course, steady and unwavering. Aboard the ship, 847 crew members went about their duties with grim determination. They knew the odds. Everyone in human space knew the odds. The broadcasts had been clear. This was likely a one-way mission. But they had volunteered anyway, every single one of them. Captain Sarah Chen, no relation to the ambassador, sat in the command chair, watching the tactical displays. She was 43, a career Navy officer who had seen action in the brief border skirmishes with the Tarn Collective 15 years ago. This was different. This was facing an enemy that had never lost. "Engineering. Status report," she said calmly. "All systems green, Captain." The voice belonged to Chief Engineer Marcus Webb. "Though I'm still running those modifications you approved." "How long until they're complete?" "Another 6 hours, give or take." Captain Chen allowed herself a slight smile. Marcus Webb was the reason she had volunteered to command this mission. The man was a genius, though he'd never admit it. Born on a colony ship that had suffered catastrophic system failures during its journey, Marcus had grown up in an environment where life depended on understanding how broken machinery could be coaxed back to life. He saw patterns in chaos that nobody else could perceive. When the call went out for volunteers, Marcus had been the first to sign up. "Someone has to try," he'd said simply. Might as well be me. The Defiant crossed into contested space 3 days later. Sensor arrays detected massive energy signatures ahead, the Crethaxian fleet, waiting like predators at a watering hole. 23 capital ships, reported the sensor officer, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Approximately 150 support craft. Total mass exceeds our displacement by a factor of 400. Tactical, what are we facing? Captain Chen asked. The tactical officer brought up a holographic display. The Crethaxian ships were unlike anything in conventional design. They looked almost alive with curved surfaces that shifted and rippled. Sensor data showed their hulls were part biological, part technological, a hybrid that could adapt and evolve in real time. Their weapons systems are difficult to classify, the tactical officer said. They seem to change configuration based on their target. Energy weapons, projectile weapons, electromagnetic pulses, sometimes all three simultaneously. Marcus Webb entered the bridge, wiping grease from his hands. He studied the display with intense focus, his eyes moving rapidly as if reading something invisible to everyone else. Captain, he said quietly, I need to show you something. It's about their ships. I think I found something. Captain Chen stood. Commander Okafor, you have the bridge. Mr. Webb, lead the way. As they left the bridge, every crew member felt the weight of what was coming. Behind them, 23 Crethaxian warships began powering up their weapons. Ahead of them, the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The Defiant flew on, small and defiant indeed, toward the storm. Marcus Webb led Captain Chen through the cramped corridors to engineering, past crew members who snapped to attention as their captain passed. The engineering bay hummed with activity, screens displaying endless streams of data about the ship's systems. Look at this, Marcus said, pulling up sensor readings of the Crethaxian vessels. Everyone thinks their strength is adaptation, the ability to counter whatever you throw at them. And that's true, but it's not the whole picture. Captain Chen studied the displays. Explain it simply, Marcus. I'm a tactician, not an engineer. Marcus grinned, the kind of expression he wore when he was excited about a problem. Their ships are partly alive. The biological components actually think, in a way. They process information and respond to threats. It's like, imagine if your ship could feel pain and automatically flinch away from whatever hurt it, but also remember that pain and build armor against it. That sounds impossible to beat. It should be. Marcus pulled up more data, his fingers dancing across the console. But here's the thing. Living systems follow patterns. They have to, or they'd be chaos. And patterns can be predicted. You think you can predict how they'll adapt? Better than that, Marcus said, his eyes gleaming. I think I can teach them the wrong patterns. Before Captain Chen could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. They rushed back to the bridge. 3 Crethaxian destroyers breaking formation, reported the sensor officer. They're moving to intercept us. Distance 2 million kilometers and closing. Captain Chen dropped into her command chair. Battle stations. All hands, this is not a drill. Tactical. Give me firing solutions on those destroyers. The crew moved with practiced efficiency despite the fear coursing through them. Everyone knew this was humanity's first real engagement with the Dominion. What happened in the next few minutes would be studied, if anyone survived to study it. Aboard the Crethaxian flagship Harvester of Worlds, Overlord Zarketh observed the approaching human vessel with clinical interest. He was ancient by Dominion standards, having personally overseen the conquest of 15 different species. The human ship registered as barely worth his attention. Primitive weapons, outdated shields, no biomechanical systems whatsoever. Why do they not flee? Asked his tactical coordinator, a younger Dominion officer still learning the art of conquest. Pride, Zarketh replied, his voice like grinding stone. Every species exhibits it. They convince themselves they have some advantage, some hidden strength. Then they die and we move on. Should we destroy them quickly? No. Zarketh leaned forward in his command throne. Send 3 light destroyers. Let us observe how humans fight before we end them. The destroyers accelerated forward, their living hulls rippling with anticipation. On the Defiant, Marcus had returned to the bridge and stood at an auxiliary engineering console. Captain requesting permission to route weapons control through my station. Granted. You have tactical command, Mr. Webb. Don't get us killed in the first 30 seconds. No promises, Marcus muttered, already absorbed in his calculations. The Crethaxian destroyers opened fire at 800,000 kilometers. Energy beams lanced through space, burning with colors that hurt to look at. The Defiant rolled hard, its older maneuvering thrusters screaming with the sudden demand. "Shields holding at 83%, called out the engineering officer. "But those weren't direct hits." "They're testing us." "Good," Marcus said. "Let them test." He fired the Defiant's railguns in a spread pattern, not aimed at the destroyers but at the space around them. The tungsten projectiles created a field of debris and interference. The Crethaxian ships adapted instantly. Their shields reconfigured to deflect solid projectiles. Their sensors filtered out the interference. They came through the debris cloud unscathed and fired again. This time Marcus threw the ship into a wild corkscrew pattern while firing missiles from the port tubes. The missiles were old-style nuclear warheads, crude but powerful. The Crethaxian destroyers' point defense systems came alive, shooting down the missiles with ease. But while they focused on the missiles, Marcus fired the starboard railguns at maximum power. One projectile got through, slamming into a destroyer's hull. The damage was minimal. The biological hull simply flowed around the impact point, but it was damaged nonetheless. On the Harvester of Worlds, Zarketh sat up straighter. "Interesting. The humans coordinate their attacks in layers, crude but showing tactical awareness." The battle continued for 23 minutes. The Defiant danced and weaved, never quite where the Crethaxian weapons expected it to be. Marcus fired in patterns that seemed random but weren't. Each attack taught the enemy ship something specific about human tactics. "They're learning too fast," Captain Chen said, watching as the enemy's accuracy improved with each exchange. "We can't keep this up." "We don't need to," Marcus replied, sweat beading on his forehead. "I got what I needed." "What's that?" "Data, lots of it." Marcus pulled up screens showing the Crethaxian ship's response times, adaptation patterns, weapon configurations. They're predictable in how they adapt. They follow rules, biological rules, but rules nonetheless. "Commander, get us out of here," Captain Chen ordered. "Maximum burn back toward the asteroid belt." The Defiant turned and ran, its fusion drives pushing to redline. The Crethaxian destroyers pursued but didn't follow into the asteroid belt. They returned to the main fleet, having completed their reconnaissance. Zarketh reviewed the battle data with satisfaction. "The humans are competent but outmatched. Their ship performed better than expected, but we have cataloged their capabilities. When we engage them fully, victory will take minutes, not hours." His tactical coordinator nodded agreement. "Shall I prepare the assault fleet?" "Not yet. Let them think they escaped. Let them believe they have a chance." Zarketh's eyes gleamed. Hope makes the final defeat more crushing. In the Defiant's engineering bay, Marcus worked through the night, analyzing every second of the battle. The crew tried to rest, but sleep came hard knowing what they'd faced. Captain Chen found Marcus 12 hours later, still at his console, surrounded by cold coffee and data screens. "You should rest," she said. "Can't. I'm close to something." He looked up at her, exhausted, but excited. "Captain, what if I told you we could win this?" "I'd say you need sleep." "I'm serious." Marcus pulled up a simulation. "Their ships are smarter than ours, faster than ours, more powerful than ours. But they think like living things, and living things can be fooled." Captain Chen watched the simulation run through scenarios, showing Crethaxian ships responding to various human tactics. "What are you proposing?" Marcus smiled, the expression of someone who'd just solved an impossible puzzle. "I'm going to teach them how to fight us, and then I'm going to break every rule I taught them." Over the next 3 weeks, the Defiant engaged the Crethaxian fleet in 17 separate skirmishes. Each one followed a pattern that Marcus carefully orchestrated. The human ship would appear at the edge of sensor range, fire a specific sequence of weapons, execute particular evasive maneuvers, and then retreat before taking critical damage. To the crew, it felt like suicide in slow motion. They were teaching the enemy how to kill them. "I don't understand the plan," Commander Okafor admitted during one of the senior staff meetings. "We're giving them everything. Our weapon capacities, our maneuvering limitations, our shield frequencies. Why don't they just finish us?" "Because they're curious," Marcus explained, looking more tired than ever. Dark circles had formed under his eyes from weeks of minimal sleep. "Overlord Zarketh wants to understand us completely before he destroys us. It's how the Dominion operates, total knowledge before total conquest." "And you're giving him that knowledge, Guy," said Lieutenant Park from Weapons Control. She didn't sound accusatory, just confused. "I'm giving him what I want him to know," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference." Captain Chen studied the tactical display showing their latest engagement. The Crethaxian response times had improved dramatically. They now countered human tactics within seconds of encountering them. "Marcus, at some point they'll stop being curious and just overwhelm us. We've lost 32 crew members in these skirmishes. How much longer?" "2 more engagements," Marcus said. "Maybe 3. Then we make our move." "What move?" Commander Okafor pressed. "You keep saying you have a plan, but people are dying. The crew deserves to know what they're dying for." Marcus met his eyes. "They're dying so we can win." "I know how that sounds. But I need everyone to trust me just a little longer." The room fell silent. Finally, Captain Chen spoke. 2 more engagements. Then you give us the full plan, or I'm calling this off and we run for Earth with whatever data we've gathered." "Fair enough," Marcus agreed. Aboard the Harvester of Worlds, Zarketh reviewed the combat data with growing satisfaction. The human ship had proven more resilient than expected, but each encounter revealed more of its limitations. Their weapons, while creatively employed, followed predictable patterns. Their shields operated on standard frequencies. Their maneuvers, though skilled, stayed within the physical constraints of their ship's capabilities. "The humans are brave," Zarketh told his staff. "That is worth acknowledging. But bravery without power is merely prolonged defeat." His tactical coordinator displayed their analysis. "We have now cataloged 97% of their combat capabilities. The remaining 3% appears to be variations on existing patterns. We could destroy them at any time." "Not yet," Zarketh said. He had been studying the human commander, this Marcus Webb, whose name appeared repeatedly in their intercepted communications. Something about the human's approach nagged at him, a detail that didn't quite fit. "1 more engagement. I want absolute certainty." The 18th skirmish occurred near the shattered remains of a destroyed space station. The Defiant appeared exactly as predicted, following the attack pattern the Crethaxians had learned to expect. But this time something was different. Marcus had stopped sleeping entirely. He worked around the clock in engineering, making modifications to every system on the ship. The crew watched him with a mixture of concern and hope. He was either a genius who would save them all, or he'd cracked under the pressure. "Marcus, you look terrible," Captain Chen said, finding him rewiring a power junction at 3 a.m. ship time. "Just a few more adjustments," he mumbled, not looking up from his work. "Almost ready." "Ready for what?" He finally looked at her, and she saw something burning in his eyes, not madness, but absolute conviction. "Ready to show them that predictability is their weakness, not their strength." "I don't understand." Marcus set down his tools and pulled up a holographic display. "Every living thing in the universe follows patterns. Neurons fire in sequences, hearts beat in rhythms, lungs breathe in cycles. It's how life works, ordered chaos. The Crethaxian ships are alive, which means they need patterns to function. So you taught them our patterns." "Exactly. And their living ships have spent 3 weeks learning to counter those patterns. They've built their entire tactical response around what they've learned." Marcus's smile was slightly unhinged. "Now I'm going to show them something that doesn't follow any pattern at all." "That's impossible. Everything follows some kind of pattern." "Not if you deliberately create chaos," Marcus said. "I've been modifying our systems to operate in ways that violate their own design specifications. The weapons will fire at power levels they were never meant to handle. The engines will pulse in sequences that should tear them apart. The shields will cycle through frequencies faster than our generators can actually produce them." Captain Chen stared at him. "You're going to break our own ship?" "Only for about 45 seconds. That's how long these modifications will last before everything fails. But in those 45 seconds will be complete chaos. No patterns. No predictability. Nothing their adaptive systems can counter because there's nothing consistent to adapt to." "And after 45 seconds?" Marcus shrugged. "Either we've won or we're dead. Probably dead anyway, if I'm being honest." Captain Chen considered this for a long moment. "You're insane, probably. Will you let me try anyway?" She thought about the crew, about Earth, about every human world waiting to see if resistance was even possible. "Yes, but we do this on my terms. I'm broadcasting a challenge to Zarketh, single combat our ship against his flagship. He'll never accept." "He will," Captain Chen said with certainty. "Because you were right about one thing, he wants to understand us. And the best way to understand something is to break it yourself. 2 days later, the Defiant broadcast its challenge on all frequencies. The message was simple. Humanity challenged the Krathaxian Dominion to single combat. If the Defiant won, the Dominion would leave human space. If the Dominion won, humanity would surrender without further resistance. Across the galaxy, species watched in disbelief. The audacity was either incredibly brave or monumentally stupid. Zarketh received the message and actually laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. The humans have gone mad, good. Madness makes conquest easier. But his tactical coordinator looked troubled. Overlord, this could be a trap. With what? Zarketh gestured at their displays. We know everything about their ship. We have counters for every weapon, every tactic, every maneuver. What trap could they possibly set? The coordinator had no answer. I accept their challenge, Zarketh announced. We will face them in the debris field of their own destroyed colony. Let that be the arena where humanity's last hope dies. The Harvester of Worlds moved into position, its massive bulk dwarfing the Defiant. The smaller human ship held station across from it, weapons powered but not yet firing. In engineering, Marcus made the final adjustments to his modifications. His hands shook with exhaustion and nervous energy. Ready? Captain Chen asked over the comm. Marcus took a deep breath. Ready. Remember, once I activate this, we have 45 seconds before everything fails. Make them count. Understood. All hands battle stations. This is it. The two ships faced each other across the void, predator and prey, but which was which remained to be seen. The debris field around the destroyed colony stretched for thousands of kilometers. Twisted metal, frozen atmosphere crystals, and the silent remnants of 15,000 lives. It was humanity's choice for the battlefield, a reminder of what they stood to lose. Beginning engagement, Captain Chen announced calmly. Weapons free. The Defiant opened fire with its railguns exactly as it had in every previous engagement. The tungsten rounds streaked toward the Harvester of Worlds in the familiar spread pattern Marcus had used 17 times before. Zarketh watched with satisfaction as his ship's shields adapted instantly, deflecting the projectiles without effort. They learned nothing. How disappointing. The Defiant rolled and fired missiles next, the same nuclear-tipped weapons they'd employed before. The Harvester's point defense systems eliminated them 300 kilometers out. Every defense was perfect because every attack was expected. Their tactics are identical to previous engagements, reported the tactical coordinator. No variations detected. Prepare the Harvester beam, Zarketh ordered. Let us end this quickly, but something nagged at him. The human engineer, Marcus Webb, had proven clever in their skirmishes. Why would he repeat failed tactics in what should be humanity's final stand? On the Defiance bridge, Marcus watched the chronometer. 30 seconds of conventional combat. The Krathaxian ship's adaptive systems were fully engaged, all their learned responses active and ready. Now, Captain. Captain Chen nodded. Mr. Webb, you have control. God help us all. Marcus's fingers flew across his console, activating every modification he'd spent 3 weeks building. Throughout the ship, systems that should never work together suddenly came alive in impossible harmony. The Defiant's fusion drive spiked to 240% of its rated capacity. The ship lunged forward with acceleration that should have crushed the crew. But Marcus had rerouted the inertial dampeners through the shield generators, creating a field that shouldn't exist according to known physics. The railguns fired at 3 times their normal rate, while simultaneously operating at 70% and 130% power. Different turrets at different outputs, creating a pattern of chaos. Some rounds moved fast, some slow, some wobbled, some flew perfectly straight. The shield frequencies began cycling at impossible speeds, shifting through spectrums the generators weren't designed to produce. They flickered in and out of existence, sometimes in multiple configurations simultaneously. Energy readings from the Defiant spiked wildly. The ship's signature changed every microsecond. Heat, radiation, electromagnetic output all fluctuating without pattern or rhythm. Aboard the Harvester of Worlds, alarms screamed. What is happening? Zarketh demanded, rising from his command throne. Unknown. The tactical coordinator's voice held panic. Their ship is operating outside all established parameters. Weapon output is variable and contradictory. Shield frequencies are cycling faster than we can track. Propulsion readings are impossible. The Harvester's adaptive systems, so perfect at learning patterns, tried desperately to adjust. But there was nothing to learn. Every response they generated was immediately obsolete because the Defiant systems never did the same thing twice. The biological components of the Crethaxian ship began to experience something they'd never felt before: confusion, pain, sensory overload. Marcus pushed his modifications further. The ship's weapons fired in sequences that defied tactical logic, sometimes all at once, sometimes pausing at random intervals, sometimes targeting empty space. The Defiant spun and rolled in maneuvers that should have torn it apart, held together only by the contradictory forces Marcus had created. "They're flooding our sensor systems," shouted the Harvester's sensor operator. "Every scan returns different data. It's like the ship is in multiple states simultaneously." Zarketh finally understood. The human hadn't taught them patterns to exploit their learning. He'd taught them patterns so their learning would become a weakness. Now the Dominion ship's adaptive systems were choking on chaos, trying to find patterns in pure noise. "Override the adaptive protocols," Zarketh commanded. Manual control, but it was too late. The Harvester's biological components had committed fully to adaptation mode. Overriding them would take time they didn't have. The Defiant closed to point-blank range, something no sane captain would do, and unleashed everything it had. Weapons fired at random power levels. Energy beams crossed at impossible angles. Missiles launched in spirals. The ship itself became a storm of contradictions. The Harvester's shields tried to adapt and failed. They configured for energy weapons and got hit by projectiles. They strengthened against kinetic impact and got burned by lasers. They prepared for missiles and got rammed by energy beams. Damage began to accumulate, not from any single devastating blow, but from hundreds of small impacts that the adaptive systems couldn't counter because they couldn't predict what was coming. 30 seconds, Marcus gasped, sweat pouring down his face. The strain of coordinating the chaos was enormous. Every system on the Defiant was screaming alerts. Hull stress at critical levels. Power grid overloading. Weapons overheating. Engines burning out. "Keep going," Captain Chen ordered, even as her console sparked and died. "Helmsman, stay on him!" The Defiant danced around the much larger Harvester of Worlds like an insect attacking a giant, stinging from every angle with attacks that followed no logic. No pattern, no predictability. Inside the Crethaxian flagship, the biological components began to shut down. Their neural pathways, overwhelmed by contradictory data, simply stopped processing. It was like a brain experiencing a stroke. Parts of the ship going dark as the living systems failed. Main power failing. The tactical coordinator's voice was frantic. Biological processors offline. Weapons grid unresponsive. Zarketh stared at the chaos consuming his perfect ship. For the first time in his long life of conquests, he felt genuine fear. The human had done something no enemy had managed. He'd turned the Dominion's greatest strength into its greatest weakness. 45 seconds, Marcus announced, then collapsed across his console. Smoke filled the engineering bay. Alarms shrieked throughout the ship. "All stop," Captain Chen commanded. "Emergency power only. Damage control teams, report." The Defiant drifted to a halt, systems failing all around it. Life support flickered. Gravity went out in several sections. The ship was dying, but it had lasted just long enough. Across the debris field, the Harvester of Worlds hung dark and silent. Its shields were down. Its weapons cold. The living components of its biomechanical systems had shut down completely, unable to process the sensory overload they'd experienced. In the command center of the Harvester, emergency lighting cast Zarketh's face in harsh shadows. His perfect flagship, which had never known defeat, was dead in space. "Tactical status," he commanded. "All primary systems offline. Biological processors entering hibernation state to prevent permanent damage. Estimated time to restore basic function, 6 hours. Full combat capability, 3 days. Zarketh looked at the drifting Defiant. The human ship was clearly crippled as well, smoke venting from dozens of hull breaches. But it was still there, still intact, still defiant. The rest of the Crethaxian fleet held position, their commanders uncertain. Protocol demanded they destroy the Defiant immediately, but Overlord Zarketh had not given that order. He simply sat in his darkened command center, staring at the impossible. A human ship, primitive and outmatched, had beaten the flagship of the Crethaxian Dominion. Not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through something the Dominion had never encountered. Deliberate, orchestrated chaos. "Sir," his tactical coordinator asked quietly, "your orders?" Zarketh was silent for a long moment. Then he did something he had never done in 40 years of conquest. Open a communication channel to the human ship. "I wish to speak with their commander." The communication request came through on one of the Defiant's few working consoles. Captain Chen, her uniform torn and face smudged with soot, stared at it in disbelief. "They want to talk," Commander Okafor said, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "After everything, they want to talk." "Accept it," Captain Chen ordered. Visual and audio. The main screen flickered to life, showing Overlord Zarketh in his darkened command center. He was tall and angular, with skin like polished stone and eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. When he spoke, his voice came through the translator as surprisingly calm. "I am Overlord Zarketh of the Krathaxian Dominion. I wish to speak with the one called Marcus Webb." Captain Chen glanced toward engineering where medical teams were working. "Mr. Webb is unconscious. I am Captain Sarah Chen. I command this vessel. Then you will suffice." Zarketh leaned forward slightly. "I have conquered 15 species, Captain Chen. I have studied warfare for longer than your species has possessed spaceflight. I have never been defeated. Until today. We're both dead in space," Captain Chen pointed out. "I wouldn't call this a victory for either of us." "That is where you are wrong." Zarketh gestured around his darkened bridge. "My fleet could destroy your ship in moments. I have 22 operational warships in this system. You have none. Yet I consider this a defeat, and you should consider it a victory. Why? Because you have done what no species before you has managed. You have stopped us." Zarketh's glowing eyes dimmed slightly. "The Krathaxian Dominion advances through perfect adaptation. We learn from every enemy and become immune to their tactics. It has made us unstoppable for 3 centuries. But you can't adapt to chaos," Captain Chen said, understanding dawning. "Precisely. Your engineer created a situation where adaptation became a liability. Our biological systems tried to process patterns that didn't exist. It was like asking a mind to understand madness. Eventually, the mind simply fails to protect itself." Zarketh paused. "It was brilliant. Horrifying but brilliant." In the medical bay, Marcus Webb opened his eyes. Every part of his body ached. A medic leaned over him. "Easy, Chief, you collapsed from exhaustion. You've been out for 20 minutes. The battle?" Marcus croaked. "We're still here. That's all I know." Marcus tried to sit up, nearly passed out, then tried again more carefully. "I need to get to the bridge." "You need rest. Now." Marcus's voice had steel in it despite his weakness. The medic helped him to his feet. Marcus stumbled through corridors lit by emergency lighting, past crew members doing damage control until he reached the bridge. He arrived just as Zarketh was speaking. "Your species interests me, Captain Chen. Most species fight with their strengths. You fought with weakness, with imperfection, randomness, chaos. It should not have worked, but it did," Marcus said, leaning against the doorframe. Everyone turned. Captain Chen started to order him back to medical, then stopped. This was Marcus's moment. Zarketh's eyes fixed on the exhausted human. "You are Marcus Webb, the architect of this impossible victory." "Not a victory," Marcus corrected, shuffling toward the communication console. "Just a standstill. Your fleet could finish us any time, but you won't. Why would I not? Because you're curious. You need to understand how we did this, and there's something else." Marcus managed a tired smile. "You're afraid." Silence fell across both bridges. No one spoke to Overlord Zarketh that way, but the ancient conqueror simply nodded slowly. "Yes. For the first time in my memory, I am afraid. Because if your primitive ship could do this, what could your species do with time to prepare? What could other species do if they learned from your example?" "Exactly," Marcus said. "You've hit a wall, not made of weapons or shields, but of philosophy. Your perfection is your prison. Life isn't perfect. It's messy and chaotic and unpredictable. You forgot that." Zarketh was quiet for a long moment. "So what happens now, Marcus Webb?" "Now we have a standstill. You can't advance without risking more defeats. We can't push you back without more ships like ours. So we wait. We watch each other. The war isn't over, but it's paused. That is unacceptable to the Dominion." "Then adapt," Marcus said simply. "Isn't that what you do?" The communication went dark. For several minutes, no one on the Defiance bridge spoke. Then slowly, the sensors picked up movement. The Crethaxian fleet was repositioning, not to attack but to establish a defensive perimeter around the Zarian system. "They're holding position," the sensor officer said in amazement. "They're not advancing." Word spread through human space within hours. The Defiant had not destroyed the Crethaxian fleet, but it had done something more important. It had stopped them. For the first time since the Dominion began its expansion, they had been brought to a halt. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Ambassador Chen stood before them, her face displayed on screens across 200 worlds. "Humanity stood against the Dominion," she announced. "We did not win, but we did not lose. We proved that resistance is possible, that adaptation has limits, that chaos can be a weapon." Across the galaxy, species that had surrendered began to whisper of rebellion. Enslaved worlds looked to the stars with new hope. The Crethaxian Dominion, for 3 centuries an unstoppable force, had become stoppable. 3 months later, an uneasy peace settled over the region. The Dominion fleet remained at Zarion, neither attacking nor retreating. Human ships brought supplies to the Defiant, which remained on station as a symbol of resistance. The crew rotated out in shifts, but Captain Chen and Marcus Webb stayed. Marcus spent his time analyzing the battle, writing detailed reports on his tactics. Other species requested the information. Some tried to replicate his approach. Most failed. What Marcus had done required an intuitive understanding of both, biological and mechanical systems that few possessed, but the knowledge that it was possible changed everything. "Do you think they'll attack again?" Captain Chen asked one evening, finding Marcus in the observation deck staring at the distant Crethaxian fleet. "Eventually," Marcus said. "They're adapting even now, learning to filter chaos, to recognize true randomness from hidden patterns. Give them a year, maybe 2, and they'll have counters to everything I did. Then we'll need new tactics. We'll need dozens of ships like the Defiant, hundreds maybe, each with crews trained to think in chaos." Marcus rubbed his eyes tiredly. "It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing is." Marcus smiled slightly. "Earth Command wants me to train other engineers. Share what I learned. They're calling me a hero." "You are a hero. I'm just someone who saw a pattern in a very complex system. The real heroes are the crew members who died trusting that I knew what I was doing." His voice grew quiet. 32 people, Captain. That's the price of this standstill." Captain Chen put a hand on his shoulder. "And because of them, humanity survives. Earth survives. All our colonies survive. That's not nothing, Marcus." In the distance, the Crethaxian fleet hung in space like predators waiting for prey. But they were waiting, not attacking. The impossible had become reality. The unstoppable had been stopped. Aboard the Harvester of Worlds, Overlord Zarketh stood in his observation chamber, looking at the distant human ship. His tactical staff had completed their analysis. They could overcome the human tactics with time and adaptation, but something had changed inside him. For 3 centuries, conquest had been simple. Now it was complicated, messy, unpredictable, sir. His tactical coordinator approached. "The Council of Overlords demands we resolve this situation. They want the human system crushed as an example." "Tell the Council," Zarketh said slowly, "that we are studying a new form of warfare, one that does not follow our established patterns. We will advance when we understand it fully." "And how long will that take?" Zarketh continued staring at the distant Defiant. "As long as necessary. The Dominion has time. Let us see if humanity does as well." The standstill continued. Not peace, but not war. 2 forces watching each other across the void, each knowing that when conflict resumed, it would be different from anything that came before. And in that strange, tense balance, humanity had bought itself something precious. Time. Time to build. Time to prepare. Time to teach the galaxy that chaos, imperfection, and unpredictability, the very essence of being human, could be the ultimate weapon. The war wasn't over, but for the first time there was hope that it wouldn't end in extinction. Sometimes hope was enough.